Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Why do you network? Why do you get out there and get amongst people? Chances are you're networking. Chances are you're listening to this because you want to use networking to propel you to more success. You want to connect with referrals. You want people to give you referrals. You want people to give you information that's useful to help you become more successful. You want people to connect you to opportunities. And as I've shared on this podcast in the past, there are really three reasons why people don't do this. One, you don't have enough of a relationship. They don't know you well enough. They might not like you. They might not trust you with connections or people or opportunities. That's the first thing. And to be honest, while that does happen, generally speaking, if you're a halfway decent person, you'll develop enough of a relationship that people will like you and want to help you. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that people aren't able to recognize opportunities for you. And that's the big one. And I'm going to come back to that and really kind of talk a lot to that. The third thing, the third reason why people might not give you referrals is that they really like you, they want to help you, and they recognize opportunities, but they're just not comfortable talking with people about what's a good referral, about what's an opportunity, I should say. And the example, and this doesn't happen often, but it happens from time to time. Somebody just is not comfortable. For example, life insurance, right? Somebody tells me about life insurance, and or I could know a life insurance agent and be very comfortable in referring them. And they say, hey, a good opportunity for me is if you know somebody that has a young child. That's a great time to get the young child life insurance because it's really inexpensive, and if you do it the right way, they have life insurance for life, and they've bought in at the lowest possible cost. I get it. It's really kind of a financial move, but that's a hard conversation to have with somebody. To go to somebody that you may or may not know well enough to say, hey, congratulations on your child. Have you gotten life insurance on them yet? That's a tough conversation to have. And so that's really kind of that third little pillar that people struggle with. And it doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't, not all professions have a concern with that, but it's there. But it's that middle one. It's that middle one of getting people to recognize opportunities. And what I see is that people struggle with this. And a lot of times what ends up happening is just they'll ask them the question, well, how can I help you? And I fall into this as well. How can I help you? And mentally what they're saying to themselves is, oh, okay, crap. I need to say something. I'm not really ready with something to say. Next time I'll have something great and organized to say, but for today, let me just wing it. I know, I'll just say, a good referral for me or how you can help me, and then they piece together 3 or 4 semi-coherent phrases, and they hope it works out. And they've promised themselves that the next time they'll have something good to say, and they don't. They kind of do the same thing. 3 or 4 incoherent, semi-incoherent phrases, and they just hope that it works. And then when it doesn't, and they don't get referrals, they don't get information, they don't get opportunities, they just kind of put off networking as it doesn't work. And I see this from time to time. I recently asked a friend of mine, and what would be a good referral? How could I help you? And her response is, do you know solopreneurs or business owners who are frustrated about marketing or lack thereof? And, I kind of stopped her and I said, okay, I know what solopreneur means. I know what business owner means. I know what frustrated means. I know what marketing means. But to a degree, those are really vague statements. Those are really vague statements, and it's difficult for me to get my head around, well, I know what a solopreneur is, but I don't, I run into them all the time. I run into business owners all the time. I don't think of my friend because she hasn't painted a picture. It's too vague. And because it's so vague, my mind doesn't work. And the metaphor I like to go, a couple of metaphors I've used or will use is that, when you go to a restaurant, you don't tell the server, I'm here to eat, bring me some food I like. No, you're specific about it. I'd like fajitas, corn tortillas, hold the sour cream. Because if you just say, just bring me food I like, they don't know how to operate. So you get to that menu, you're specific. You go out for a drink. You don't say, yeah, the server says, hey, welcome, what can I get you? Yeah, just give me something to drink. Well, they could bring you water, they could bring you soda, they could bring you beer, they could bring you any number of things, and because you haven't narrowed it down for them, they don't really know what to do. Chances are they won't do anything. They'll just look at you as you're kind of a flake, and they won't, they'll have a lot of questions for you. They won't know what to do. Or if you ask your child, what would you like for Christmas? And the child says, just give me something fun, something I like. You know what? You're going to be stumped. You're going to have to put a lot of mental energy into finding the thing that's right for them. And with a child, you probably would, because you love your kids, and you're going to put that mental energy in and try and find that right thing. But the reality is that when you go to somebody and you say, do you know solopreneurs or business owners who are frustrated about marketing or lack thereof? They're not going to put the thinking in. Even though they might really, really like you, they're not going to put that thinking in. So, whenever we have these vague terms, and, the easy ones are like anyone, anybody, everybody, but we're asking people to think, and they're not going to think. This is the reality about the human brain. The human brain is really powerful. It is really powerful, and there's enough mental storage in somebody's head to literally hold everything on the internet. Now, that's not going to happen, but it's that immense. We really haven't even tapped the full potential of the human brain, but it holds lots of information. But what the human brain is not really good at is doing critical thinking for things that don't matter. So if I'm hungry and there's food locked in another room, I'm starving, I will figure out how to get that food because that really matters to me. But I'm not going to necessarily figure out something for somebody else because it doesn't matter for me. And so when somebody comes to me with a vague term, I want to be connected to solopreneurs or business owners who are frustrated about marketing. And I don't mean to keep picking on my friend. There are a lot of people who run afoul of this. As much as I like my friend, I'm not going to be putting that mental energy into that. Certainly not the subconscious mental energy. But if my friend seeds my brain with all sorts of different things that I can think about for them, then when I hear or see those sorts of things, my brain is that is seeded my brain. And again, my brain has an immense amount of memory. I'll remember those things, and I'll seize upon them. Let me give you an example. I was actually working within AmSpirit Business Connections with a virtual assistant. And what the virtual assistant told me is, wonderful person, was trying to get her to kind of be more specific going through this, and she was very frustrated with me, and I get it. We all think that we've seized upon the exact right thing to say, and the reality is it is a good thing to say, but in an effort to try and encompass everything in a single 30-second commercial, we end up saying nothing. Or we end up saying something that registers as nothing. And so we're going round and round, and the virtual assistant basically tells me, in a very polite way, she says, you don't understand, I do so many things that it's really impossible for me to be specific. I need to be vague. And my response is, okay, I understand that. I understand you feel that way. But you have to understand that the human brain is not going, thousands and thousands of years of development of the human brain that is not going to alter because you don't feel you have the need to be specific and you need to be vague. The brain's not going to process this. So we need to kind of work through this. And of course she's frustrated. Well, it's really anything, anybody. It's, I do lots of different things. And we stopped and we talked a little bit, and I said, okay, well then, I was frustrated too. I said, well then tell me about your clients. And she said, oh, okay. I work with a lot of not-for-profits. I help a lot of small not-for-profits. I help them, a lot of these small not-for-profits, she explained, they have volunteer boards, and those volunteer boards change, and there's not necessarily continuity year to year. And so I help them get organized, and I help them maintain that continuity. It might be with respect to their books, it might be with respect to record keeping, or how they process donations and things they need to do. But I help keep this continuity going. And I'm like, oh my God, there I don't want to say there it is, but there's one example of how people can think about you and how you can lean into being a little more specific. Good referral for me is not anybody who needs a virtual assistant. That just begs the question. But to be able to say, a good referral for me is if you know that small not-for-profit that's got that volunteer board, that could be a good referral for me because I could help them with the continuity year to year. And so I was actually sharing this example with a friend of mine, Duff Dyer, who's a banker at Huntington Bank. I was just sharing the example of just how the power of the difference between something that's vague and something that's specific. And Duff, who's a banker, he stopped me and says, I need to meet that person. I'm like, what do you mean? I need to meet that person. I have lots of clients that are these small not-for-profits, and they need this help. They're disorganized. They're a mess. And I need somebody to help get them organized because they're coming to me for money and it's just a mess, and we have to spend lots of time cleaning this up year to year. And so that's a perfect example. If I'd have just said, yeah, she's a virtual assistant, it never would have registered with Duff. But it did because there was this specificity to it. So what I encourage people to do is to look at their commercials and try and not be vague about it. And I get it. You want to have something that you can say that encompasses everything. Well, that doesn't work. So you need to be specific, and that can be scary because if this virtual assistant, if all she's talking, I shouldn't say she's all she's talking about, but when she's gonna mention not-for-profits, she's not mentioning something else that, I do a lot with realtors and helping keep their social media campaigns going, which is something, I'm not saying that. I can't say both. I want to try and say everything at the same time. You need to have the courage to just be able to talk about one thing and then come back another time and talk about one thing and another time talk about one thing, especially in organizations like an AmSpirit Business Connections where you're there every week with the same people. You can continue to seed their minds. They are not going to take the time to think about what you mean by solopreneur or business owner frustrated about marketing. They're not willing to think about that. They're just not. They're busy with their own lives, trying to solve their own critical thinking problems. So they're not going to do that critical thinking for you. But what they will do is week to week, they will remember the little examples that you provide. And so if every week you come in and you have a different example, they will remember those. I was working with another chapter of AmSpirit Business Connections, and I know I get annoying with this, but I really think this is the holy grail of getting referrals, of being successful in networking. I was working with another group, and one of the members looked at me, and he was kind of frustrated. He's like, Frank, what you're basically advocating is that every week I come here with something different to say. And my response was, yes, that's it, exactly. Maybe not every week, but don't say the same thing every week. What if you had 10 different things to say in rotation? You just come with 10 different things. The people in the chapter are going to remember those 10 things. And when they run across them, they'll think of you. Or when they hear them, they'll say, oh, I do know that person, just like Duff did. Oh my gosh, that's the perfect thing. I run into that all the time. I didn't know there was a solution. Now that I know there's a solution, connect me to the solution. And so being vague doesn't work. The last, and I can go on and on and on. I have a whole, I'm developing a whole, within the AmSpirit world, I'm developing a whole library of good commercials. I mean, I think I checked, last check, there were 18 different commercials for realtors. Realtors help people buy and sell houses. What else do you need to say? Well, there's lots of reasons why people buy and sell houses. Because they're living in an apartment and they've got kids and they want to get into a house. Or they're in a house but they've married off the last kids and it's too much house for them. Or they want a vacation home. So there's lots of different reasons why somebody wants to use a realtor. And so when you start talking about the specificity, you start seeding people's brains with things to remember for you. The last metaphor I'll use is Velcro. Yes, you heard me right, Velcro. Velcro is a fastener for clothing or other items. It consists of 2 strips of thin plastic sheets. One's covered with tiny loops and the other is covered with tiny flexible hooks. And those hooks and loops adhere to each other, and that's what holds it together. Now, when you're vague, it's just like saying, okay, tiny thin plastic strips that connect together. And really, what you need to be thinking about with respect to giving commercials is you need to talk about the hooks. What are the hooks? What are the little things? Back to the virtual assistant scenario. A little hook is a small not-for-profit. That's a little hook. Another little hook might be a small realtor who doesn't have the capacity to hire somebody full-time to keep on top of keeping after their social media. Those are little hooks to mention. And realtors have a ton of little hooks. My friend who's got the marketing business, there's a ton of little hooks that she needs to talk about. I've talked to other marketing people, and some of their little hooks are people that have business cards that are just not memorable. They might be flimsy. They give a poor impression. Now, they don't want to sell business cards necessarily, but that's the first step to connecting them to somebody. So you connect them to somebody, and they can talk about business cards, and chances are somebody who has got a substandard business card, that's not the only problem they have, but their foot in the door is business cards, or the foot in the door might be small not-for-profit or whatever. But what I'm trying to get you to understand, what I'm trying to get other people to understand, is that there needs to be a level of specificity. You cannot be vague and hope that your network is going to generate referrals for you. They are not going to do the critical thinking for you, and you need to seed their minds with what the little bits and pieces of things that you do. Get them thinking about you in a different way. I know this is a big topic. It's something that I'll likely hammer on again and again. It's something that I devote literally hours to within the AmSpirit Business Connections world. Sitting down with people individually, at chapters, even group calls where people can come in and we work on these things. Because when you craft these things, when you craft these powerful commercials, people get more referrals as a result of it. And that's why you're in networking. So if you're going to be in networking, you might as well do it the right way.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.